A few housekeeping rules before we begin. The session is being recorded. If you're not comfortable with that, feel free to leave the session now. Please keep your microphone muted throughout the session and kindly switch off your camera. It will help us preserve the bandwidth and ensure a smooth experience for everyone. And if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll go through everything at the end of the presentation and give you ample time to ask your questions and to have a response from our esteemed guests. Today, we're seeing that the maritime world is becoming ever more connected, and with that comes the rising tide of cyber threats, of course. Now, staying ahead requires not just strong defenses, but also smart intelligence. So for the final webinar of this series, we're going to focus on cyber threat intelligence, or CTI. And for that, we invited Professor Dr. Dimitar Nikolov. He's the Red Team Lead and Professor of Ethical Hacking and Cyber Warfare at the Nikola Vaptsarov Naval Academy in Varna, Bulgaria. He will walk us through the world of cyber threat intelligence, how it's built, how it's shared, and how it's used to protect the maritime domain. So, Nikola, the ship is yours. You can share your screen and you can start.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Let me share my presentation quickly.
Yes, we see it.
Can you confirm? Yes, thank you very much. So thanks everyone for having me today. I'll try to introduce you to some bits and pieces about cyber threat intelligence, as was mentioned, what it is, why is it important, why do I think it's important, and how can we practically use it. So first of all, a little bit about me. Yeah, as it was mentioned, I have my PhD in cybersecurity, have a couple of certificates. I work as an assistant professor in the Naval Academy. I teach mainly offensive cybersecurity subjects. And my other specialty is red team assessments. I'm a red team lead, and I'm using cyber threat intelligence and producing cyber threat intelligence on a daily basis for one reason or another. So that said, let's first try to define what exactly cyber threat intelligence is. And of course, the first thing that we can say is, what is actually intelligence? So there is a proverb, scientia est potentia, attributed to Sir Francis Bacon. There is other people that have been using it. In short, it means knowledge is a power. Now, knowledge can be many things. So what is meant under intelligence, that is a specific knowledge that enables us to take the proper decisions and act upon them in our favor. So that's in essence what intelligence is. Now, intelligence is a very old thing, and it has been used throughout the centuries, and sometimes it fails. Sometimes it fails, and I'll try to explain some of the reasons why intelligence efforts fail, but it can be also quite useful. So a subdomain of that is the threat intelligence. Threat intelligence is something that is trying to describe and define the threats related to our main subject or area of operations as it's known. In this case, it is the maritime domain, and subdomain of threat intelligence is actually cyber threat intelligence, and it is more closely related to the cyber operations of an entity, be it a company or an army or whatever it is. And the way it is produced, and let's first talk about a little bit about the some of the specifics of what makes a good cyber threat intelligence, basically. So threat intel is a detailed and actionable information about cybersecurity threats. That's what cyber threat intelligence is, and helps security teams take proactive approach to detecting and mitigating, preventing cyber attacks. Why proactive? For a long time, cybersecurity has been stuck in medieval times, I would say. We built our perimeter defenses, we do our settings, do some configurations, put some controls in place, and cybersecurity experts tend to hide behind it and hope our defenses never get breached. No, that means it's not a bad thing. It's mandatory. It's very important, but that means we have lost the initiative. And by losing the initiative, basically that dooms us for losing the war. There will always be a breach. There is always a way to breach defenses. And if we're stationary, we have lost the initiative. Without the initiative, there is no way that we are successful. And proactive measures and proactive countermeasures are probably the most important part of taking back that initiative and being much more successful. And there's many different types of proactive and active countermeasures. So how is the intelligence basically produced? Or first, let's talk a little bit about what is the position of threat intelligence. Now, cyber threat intelligence doesn't exist by itself. It's related to other subdomains of cybersecurity, and that's why it is important. It helps threat hunters, providing them bits and pieces of information about the relevant threats, how they operate, what are their tactics, procedures, what is to be expected, how can we identify them. Vulnerability management. It provides information about different vulnerabilities that can be exploited, that are important, and helps prioritize the patching of vulnerabilities in a sense. Security architecture is also threat modeling. That's also in the domain of threat intelligence. Fraud management, quite popular recently. There is always financial crime, and fin crime can be supported by threat intelligence, be it different trend analysis, specifics about certain local, geographical related specifics of the fin crime, etc. Incident response. Now, every time we have an incident or breach attempt or anything in the company I work for, I get caught in a war room if it's serious enough incident. And what I'm helpful with is I know the thinking of an attacker. I know most of their techniques, tactics, procedures, modus operandi, and I'm trying to identify attribute to a certain extent through those observables. I'm trying to portray the potential attacker, which means once we get a good idea of who's attacking us, and that's mind you a profile. It doesn't have to be a full exact match, but we know what to expect as a future action. Where are they gonna head for? What are they trying to achieve? What are their motivations? And so on. And that improves, because it frees resources, it improves our capabilities to react, basically. Risk management, again, that's in the field of rather operational strategic intelligence, but that helps us identify crown jewels, the most important pieces that we need to protect. What is the risk related to them? What is the current state of the risk? Is there any changes in the threat landscape? Is there any attacks maybe pending, or is there some information, probably you found the chats or something else in, let's say, Telegram, that different groups are discussing attacks against your company. So you can issue a brief or a statement, a short notice, and that's in the field of warnings capabilities of the intelligence. So by issuing that warning, we are prepared much better to react in case of impeding attack. SOC analysis, also we help them there with different bits and pieces. Usually those are indicators of attack, indicators of compromise, and those connections, they work both ways. And I will mention later on the collection matrix, but shortly that's a catalog of your sources where you can find information about the different things that are important. You can find data, and all those pieces provide, and all those connections, they provide different types of data relevant to different things. Like, for example, a threat hunter can provide much more information about previous attacks, how were they identified, what worked, what didn't work. A SOC analyst can provide you with IOCs, and that's quite important piece of information for the company, although might not be relevant to different companies. That's a very important tactical piece of information. The vulnerability management, they can provide you with vulnerabilities that are probably not fully patched at the moment, and they can expose the company, and so on and so on. So now, how is actually intelligence produced, and what are the important characteristics of intelligence? First of all, to be able to produce intelligence, you have to be aware of the operational environment. And once you know all of it, the entry points, the information data flow and all that, you can start collecting your data. Now, data is just that. It's not intelligence yet. It's just pieces of some kind of information out of context, bits and pieces we collect from everywhere. And all that data, after it gets processed and prepared, assessed, turns into information. So information is more like a data with context that can help you, after you analyze all that, to get the intelligence product, which in essence is the answer of a certain question, which is mighty important. We're not doing intelligence just for the sake of intelligence. Intelligence is useful when it gives specific actionable answer to a very specific question. And those questions have different names depending on the type of question being asked. And we'll talk about them more in a few minutes. So important characteristics of intelligence. Intelligence should be accurate. If it's not completely accurate, it might mislead our following action and our client. It should be timely, and there is a latest time of value. There is such a term which describes what is the latest time that this information can be of any use, this intelligence. Because some pieces of intelligence have very short lifetime. For example, IOCs, once attack is over, let's say somebody's scanning your network, your external perimeter, somebody's scanning it, and you get an IP, and you block it. As soon as you block it, that IOC is pretty much useless, because as soon as the attacker realizes they have been blocked, they'll either move away or they'll move to another IP, and sharing that indicator compromise is not very useful. It has a very, very, very short lifespan. Sometimes they have much longer, but it really depends on the type of intelligence piece. So it should be timely, it should be complete. Besides accurate, it should be complete. Because if it's partial, it quite often is partial information, it brings the risk of not giving the full picture and in one way or another changing the outcomes, changing our decisions in the wrong direction. Should be relevant. When you're reporting some piece of intelligence, doesn't matter the type of product that you deliver, it's very important that it is concise and to the point. It contains only the most relevant information supporting your final intelligence. And most important of all, it should be actionable. If your client, the C-level, the incident responders, the threat hunters, if they cannot act upon that information, it's absolutely not useful for them. So it's a waste of time on one side of the intelligence operators, analysts, on the other side of the client. They won't even work on that intelligence. So actionable is probably the most important piece of characteristic for intelligence. So that's the intelligence cycle. And there is many diagrams. If you look over the internet, there is tons of different diagrams because there is different agencies and organizations that produce intelligence. But when you move a little bit away from all these, you will notice they all have the same major stages of intelligence. So the first one is the direction. Direction plan preparation is usually part of that direction. And that is the piece that directs the intelligence. Please provide us information about that. Now, based on that, the intelligence operations manager or whoever is responsible for collecting the direction generates the different pieces of general intelligence requirements, priority intelligence requirements, requests for information, or different pieces that describe the question that we want to answer. What is the time frame it will be useful, latest time value, and also what is the form of the intelligence product. And talking about that, there might be a different intelligence products, different forms of delivery. In general, we can split them in three groups. There is the verbal. You go to briefs, you give a brief update on something. It can be a written form. Usually those are the reports or summaries or different forms of feeds. And it can also be a graphical form. Those are pictures, graphics, different diagrams, and so on. And quite often, those three types are combined. But it's very important to keep a structure. And probably the best approach is, depending on the auditory, is to go with the so-called BLUF, bottom line up front, and then give a summary. And that's where you usually will lose your senior management after that. So the rest of the report or the delivery is related to more detailed summary of what it is, how it was collected and produced, and it's very important to describe the process in brief so people that are interested can reproduce the process and get the same results. Otherwise, we're not sure. It's not sure if that intelligence has been done in a proper manner. So that ensures quality of the intelligence. So in the next step, when we have all that, there is an intelligence collection plan created, and that plan basically describes the steps, how is data going to be collected and processed. And after we have that plan, we use our collection matrix, and that collection matrix says, okay, I have, for example, information from the SIEM, Security Information Management System, Events Management System, which collects different logs and different events. And there we keep logs for, let's say, 6 months. And that matrix, we know that we can find tactical pieces, indicators of compromise, like IP addresses, MAC addresses, different requests, response events, and so on. And we know that the latest information that we can find, the time horizon of that information is 6 months. We cannot find nothing older than 6 months. For example, we can have different sources, like probably public or different sharing communities, intel reports, and those can be newer, older, and they can be in different areas, so they might not be complete. We might have different feeds. We might have our tips, threat intelligence platforms, which collect and enrich our information. And we know that we are using this and this and this sources in there, and they give us information. For example, the newest information you get from there is like 2 to 4 weeks old, or 2 to 4 hours, or something like that. So your collection matrix is really important, and then you select the useful pieces from there for your collection plan. And that way you basically optimize your collection, because it's time-consuming piece. Nowadays, there is a lots of data, so we have to be very careful, specifically with collecting the data in the right manner. Then once this collection is done, this data is collected, it gets produced, prepared for analysis. So the next step is, once we have this data structured, enriched with additional context, with additional connections, with different pieces of information, we start the analysis. Now, it's really important piece here. It's really important how we analyze data. And there is the people that have been trained in different intelligence fields know about the bias. Bias is basically a survival mechanism. It's a natural thing for us to jump to conclusions, basically. And it enables us to take decisions faster by basically skipping the loop and jumping to the conclusions. But it can be quite dangerous, because we might jump to the wrong conclusion. So there is a huge set of analysis techniques used for avoiding that bias and to keep objectivity of the analysis, the so-called structural analysis techniques, SATs. But those are not the only techniques that are being used. There is lots of traditional military and otherwise techniques that are being used to analyze the data and the information that we have collected, like network analysis, for example. It really depends what are you trying to achieve. And in that context, there is also, according to the American School of Intelligence, there is 3 types of analysis. There is a descriptive analysis, which basically serves to describe our intelligence and its state at the moment. Then we have our explanatory analysis, which explains why is our intelligence as it is, and what are the connections, what are the relations between one piece of information that we have and another piece of information. For example, it can be this threat actor has been acting in too much sync with another threat actor. Both of them have been attacking a maritime industry entities like ships, like port infrastructures, and so on. So it's quite likely, and if we have a proof, for example, they have been in the same chat groups, it's quite likely that they work together as a single piece. So that's sort of network analysis. So that's the second part. And the third part of analysis is the predictive analysis. Now, predictive techniques are used when we are trying to understand what are the most probable developments or future actions of that threat. And there is when courses of action plans are being prepared, we cannot prepare for everything. We cannot make prepare scenario for everything. So usually there is two types of scenarios that are being created on the end. One is the most probable scenario course of action, most probable course of action, and the other one is the worst case scenario. We have to be prepared for both. If we're prepared for both, then we can handle quite a big number of variants of these scenarios in between. So the worst case scenario would be really something that's affecting the resilience of operations. Like a ship won't be able to operate because its ASIS is totally gone and there's no paper charts on the ship. So it's stuck. And it costs a lot of money, of course. So the next step after the analysis is done and we produce our intelligence product is to disseminate our intelligence through the proper channels. And that's really important, because disseminating through the wrong channels or disseminating through in the wrong type of intelligence product can lead to either the intelligence not reaching the right places or not being acted upon it. So both of these cases will lead to a failure. And once this intelligence has been delivered and the cycle is almost done, it's mighty important to get feedback, assess. So in the assessment phase, in the feedback phase, that piece is responsible for understanding if we have done okay, basically. Is there anything that we need to improve? Is there any further requests for information? Is there a request for clarification? Is there anything else? Has it been useful? Is it actionable? All of these are very important pieces of feedback so we can improve on our intelligence production. Okay. So how do we build a threat intelligence program? I was responsible for building threat intelligence programs a couple of times, and it all starts with get the management buy-in, basically. If management is not convinced that they need the threat intelligence, they won't support it, so it's doomed, basically. So how do we do that? We basically make our intelligence piece useful by being active listener on C-level meetings, propose useful intelligence preparation, take care of preparing that intelligence and provide it in timely and proper manner. Once intelligence uses that once management uses that intelligence and they make proper actions and they see the result of that, they'll start be more and more depending on you, and they'll understand the value of cyber threat intelligence. Basically, at this point, you can say, okay, to provide more of that, basically, we need to organize a program. And then you define the program, and it's very important from the very beginning to set proper expectations. So you define the program mission, what are the scope, what are the expected deliverables, and then you start defining general information requirements. General information intelligence requirements are basically things that are being monitored on the constant basis. Okay, so these are requirements that are being constantly satisfied and reiterated again and again and again and again, because they're very valuable for the company. On the other hand, requests for information should be defined, and processes created for all that, prioritization for all that should be also created at this point, so intelligence can start be produced in a proper manner. Otherwise, it cannot be management. Time and resources cannot be managed in a proper manner. So priority information requirements are information intelligence requirements that come in and they're very time sensitive in a sense. So those should be actioned first. So once all these processes and types of requirements are clear and the types of deliverables are clear also, next step is build the CTI capabilities. And one of the very important pieces of capability is the team. So what are the people that actually produce intelligence? People think about them like, they consider them like guys like James Bond. It's not James Bond, I can tell you. Most of the guys that actually produce intelligence, depending on the field, but many of them come from scientific background or different types of journalists and so on. These are people that have a very wide general culture, education, and they can write papers and analyze. Analysis is very important. The capabilities of critical to be able to think critically about things is very important. And these people should also be quite organized and to manage their projects in a quite good manner, so they can produce and deliver on time. The next thing of the capabilities that I want to talk about is the collection matrix. I already described it. And to be successful, you really need processes and procedures for all the stages of the intelligence cycle. And that intelligence cycle, as I said, is not set in stone. It's just a model to help you produce properly intelligence. So another quite useful thing is a tip. And a tip is not the thing that we leave in the coffee. It's threat intelligence platform. And I'm going to talk about threat intelligence platforms and popular ones in a few minutes. But also the other thing that's quite important for management of the project, which threat intelligence program is also a project, is the KPIs. And about KPIs, or KPIs are quite important because you want to prove that you're valuable. You want to prove that you're doing something useful and you want to improve on that. And to prove your value for the management, it's very important to be able to provide those. They also give you quite good orientation on how are you doing and where are your weaknesses, where are you doing good. The next thing is manage and improve performance. Performance quality, always get feedback, as I mentioned. And once things start rolling, start small. Don't try to create a new CIA. or NSI or whatever agency. Those are already existing, but they have been long-term projects, and they have been long in creation. So start small. Start with one GIR. Produce the first piece of information. Produce your first report, and then build on that. Mature and evolve the program. It's a cycle. It goes again and again and again, and it gets better with the time and more interesting. So sample KPIs. Let's say for the direction, you can use the strategic alignment index, which basically measures the percentage of objectives or GIRs or intelligence requirements, and how good are those aligned with the strategy of the company, for example. And it's important. If there's misalignment, that means that you're not producing proper intelligence requirements. The next, the data source coverage rate. So we have all these sources. How many of them are we using, and how many of them are actually providing relevant data? That's important because it improves your collection capabilities. Coverage and attribution. Let's say we have identified a couple of threat actors or threat groups that are capable and have the motivation to attack us. Now, how good are we capturing? What is the percentage of covering their current actions? What are they doing? How are they preparing? What are their plans? What are their TTPs? What are they using at the moment? It's important, because if you don't have a good coverage of those threat actors, you're ready for surprises. Okay. False positives rate. There is always place for error. It's not a mathematics. So there is always chance to fail. It happens. But the better we get with time, the less false positives we give. Okay. And when intelligence fails, it's quite hard to get trust back. Okay. So we have to be very careful with that KPI. Processing. How good are we with enrichment? How efficient are we? How fast and accurate are we transforming that raw pieces of data we have collected into information and intelligence? Regarding the analysis, for example, KPI can be the proportion of intelligence reports against the actions that have been taken upon these reports. It's a very important piece, because if you're doing a good job, lots of actions will be taken on board based on your reports, because management will trust them, and that will be very important for the decision makers. Are we doing another KPIs timely delivery? Are we meeting the deadlines? Are we doing okay with the latest time of value with our intelligence piece? It's not always possible to meet the time requirements. Sometimes priority information intelligence requirement will be dropped because the team is not able to prioritize and deliver on time. So there's no point in wasting the resource on that. So it's important, manage expectations and deliver on time. It's not always possible. Things happen. Okay. But the better that rate, the better job we're doing. Integration coverage, the extent to which our intelligence is being used by the other parties, like incident responders, the threat hunters, the SOC, and so on, the vulnerability management. On the feedback, there is intelligence utilization effectiveness. That's how much the incident response or the threat hunting or whatever is improved and made more efficient as a result of our intelligence efforts. And sometimes it's hard to measure that. So it helps when you have long enough intelligence program to measure it year over year. We have improved in general the threat hunting effectiveness or incident response. There's less incidents. We have handled them in shorter time. We have been able to detect them faster. Those are KPIs for the incident responders, and they're not for the threat intelligence. That's why they're not mentioned here. But year over year, we have had this improvement. So we're doing something good. We're doing something in the right way. Return of investment, also very hard to prove, but sometimes we're able to generate quite or save quite lots of money, and it can be measured. So, tips. Threat intelligence platforms. The two most popular ones are OpenCTI and MISP. OpenCTI is something that was created by the French. It's much more modern. It has its advantages. It has graph-based intelligence. One of the most important things it has is support for sticks. Sticks framework is a standard for sharing intelligence in a structured way that can be read by machines, basically. So it's very useful for automated sharing of intelligence. MISP doesn't support that. It supports other formats like JSON and so on. And basically it has other type of advantages. Threat intelligence management, strategic operational level of intelligence is better done with OpenCTI. MISP, which means malware information sharing platform, is better for tactical operational level. It's good for strategic level, but usually it's not used that much for that. But IOCs, as I say, tabular list, correlations, aggregation of information using groups and so on is quite useful. OpenCTI is good for tracking, for example, actors, groups, and so on. It has much modern interface. It's really important. But the most important part is to know how to use your tips and what are they good in. Quite a few intelligence programs use both, actually. So other tools are Recorded Future. Now, this one is a paid intelligence. It's great, but it's paid. Threat Connect, and I have used some of the Threat Connect presentations in my presentation. They give advantage to one or the other. For example, automation or good cooperation with OpenCTI, MISP, good collaboration between the tools. That's sometimes important. The Hive used to be part of Security Onion as well. So it's used a lot for management of intelligence projects. Okay, so talking about the maturity of our threat intelligence program. We start from zero. Level 0 is we are not even clear on where to start, how to start. So you go to seminar like that one, workshop or something, and you start learning about threat intelligence, and you figure out that that's probably quite useful. So you start learning approaches, techniques, methods. You get some definitions, so that's where you get to level 1 probably. And then you start creating capabilities, start providing useful information, intelligence, and basically you go to level 2 and then to level 3. Threat intelligence is a requirement by quite a few frameworks, so it's important in that sense too. So once you have a threat intelligence program in place and it's working and it's producing intelligence and it's consuming intelligence as well, that's where you go between level 2, level 3. And when you become an established intelligence esteemed provider, you have well-defined threat intelligence program. It's working very good. It's proving its value, and it's in the center of things. Then you're already in a quite a mature state. And I'm cautious of time here, so we're gonna go over some specifics, some reasons why intelligence fails quite quickly. Direction failures. So if you don't get the question right, if it wasn't asked in the right way, and it wasn't clear what is expected to be delivered, there is good room for failure, and that breaks. That is a total intelligence failure. Collection inefficiency. As we were talking previous on the KPIs, if we are not collecting properly, then we cannot produce good intelligence, and that fails the whole process. If we use inaccurate analysis techniques, it will fail us too. For example, if we select the wrong techniques to analyze certain data or information, or maybe we fail to do a network analysis, or maybe we misunderstood what is expected to be produced, so we used different intelligence analysis techniques, or we gave up to bias and jumped to conclusions or speculated. That's quite something that happens quite often. So basically, it distorts the knowledge, the intelligence, and gives inaccurate answers. As I mentioned, improper dissemination. Soloing. Many communities, they like to put the label as very secret. We're not sharing that. That's very sensitive information, and they fail to share it. They fail to disseminate it to the proper channels, to the proper communities, to the proper users, being afraid that it might lead to exposure. So dissemination failures are quite often a problem. And finally, the failure to act. Let's say we have delivered our intelligence on time, and that intelligence was, let's say, there is vulnerability in our navigation systems, or there is a vulnerability in the way our mail is delivered to the captain of the ship, or the mail server is vulnerable and it can be exploited and wrong information can be sent, and the company says, oh, we don't have the money to deal with it, we're not going to fix it. They fail to act on that intelligence, and hence the whole intelligence fails. So, intelligence sharing. There is 4 types of CTI sharing communities or ways, so how intelligence is shared. The most popular one is the open sources intelligence, and we can create reports and publish them containing different IOCs and tactics, procedures. Many of the intelligence or the cybersecurity providers, they also provide public reports. Usually those are a little bit old though, and there is lots of noise. So the good part about the OSINT is it is public and it's free. There is lots of information. The con of that is there's way too much information. There is way too much noise. You cannot be sure about the quality of that information. Usually there is no specifics on how it has been gathered, has it been analyzed properly, how was it produced. So the next one is intelligence sharing communities, and those usually are either based on location or based on different business, like, for example, maritime industry. Those can be communities sharing maritime industry threat intelligence. And one of the cons is that you have to usually pay for getting in. And another con is that you find intelligence for maritime specific topics, but you don't receive the wider group of threat intelligence that might be quite important. Because, for example, let's say we have something like NotPetya. NotPetya wasn't covering just one industry. It was distributed between different industries. It hit lots of different industries. So it might have been not paid attention in the maritime industry. Vendor specific. Now, the disadvantage of the vendor specific intelligence is that you have to be a customer. You have to pay for it, basically. And it is being collected from the customers of this vendor. And it might turn out that other vendors had information about that threat that wasn't specific to the customers or wasn't detected by this vendor, and you might miss it. Otherwise, it's very good, high quality information usually, and there's a lot of it. So that might be a con, because you have to work with more data and more intelligence pieces. And then there is the trusted groups of experts. Now, it's very hard to get into those until you have established yourself as a good provider of intelligence and valuable member of these groups. So the problem with those is it's cutting edge intelligence usually there, but it's very hard to get in. And those groups are quite restricted for one or other reason. Okay, so why is sharing important? It gives us, all of us as a community, better situational awareness, improves detection and response capabilities, prevents and disrupts cyber attacks. And there's nothing greater than having this experience that you have helped prevent attack on other people, groups, entities, and so on by providing useful intelligence to the society or to the community. And also it builds trust and cooperation, so people also come to you and they take your advice and they also try to cooperate with you in the future. So it's also quite a good benefit of intelligence sharing. And with that, I'm pretty much done. Hope that have been useful, and I'm open for questions.
All right. Thank you, Dimitar. Do we have any questions in the chat for the moment? I don't see any questions. I do have some questions then. When you're talking about the collect plan, the different sources of CTI, can ships itself or offshore infrastructure, can they be a source of intelligence as well?
Absolutely, yes. On the ship, you have a lots of systems, and it's very interesting thing, the ship, from a cyber security perspective, because it merges OT, SCADA, and IT systems, and all of them, they communicate, they're connected, and there is also connection to the ports, and it's very interesting how we think about the ship being quite isolated, but when you inverse the image, you see how the ship is connecting to many ports and many different entities, and it's communicating all the time. And there is a lot of events that can be tracked and audited on all these ship systems. And if they're collected properly, and worked properly on and analyzed, they can be quite useful source in case of attack, because they can tell you the story. Those are the breadcrumbs that you collect, and then you reproduce what happened. So the ship can be quite a useful source, and ship systems, they can be quite a useful pieces of the collection matrix, indeed. And also the port systems and all these systems that are not on the ship, but probably in the harbor somewhere or from the shipping company. They have also different systems that also produce events and pieces of information that, when collected and managed properly, can be quite useful piece of our collection matrix. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I have another one. When you talked about the failures of sharing or the dissemination of cyber threat intelligence as not enough sharing in between organizations or in between companies, how do you convince companies that are not willing to share this kind of information? How do you convince them to share? And I know that the mantra in cybersecurity is sharing is caring. But that mantra does not work in maritime cybersecurity with the focus and the stress on maritime.
Yes. Sharing failure is and dissemination failures are quite a big issue. Now, what you can do to solve that problem is be active part of the sharing. Share your threat intelligence in the right communities. Find the right communities. Find the right pieces of information that are useful and you can share. Look into your classification. Is it too strict? Is that thing that sensitive, really? Or can it be shared? When you're actively sharing and your protection is using the proper communities in this sense, then communities start opening to you. The different companies start also sharing key information because intelligence, because they see the use, they see that thing is really useful, and they see that if you haven't shared it, they were not going to be able to protect themselves. So they start opening to you, and that builds intercommunication. They start reaching out to you, and that's how you fight this. Because information sharing was one of the siloing of that intelligence was one of the reasons that everybody was very surprised when 9/11 happened. There was intelligence, but nobody acted on it. Nobody shared it in proper manners, unfortunately. So that's really important. But that's how we fight it. That's the best way to approach it.
Okay. Now, to conclude, last question. Last week we had the roundtable on cybersecurity workforce, hosted in Antwerp, but part of the broader Ecibridge conference in Bucharest, Romania. When you're talking about setting up a team for cyber threat intelligence, do you actually need a background in cybersecurity, or do you need, or are you looking for other capabilities in people who are interested in gathering these cyber threat intelligence?
Yeah. So okay. The biggest when I'm looking for teams, for team members, for new team members, I would say probably the biggest factor is the capabilities of the person, the communication capabilities, the motivation. If this person is really motivated, if they want to work in that field, and they're able to communicate in a proper manner, to explain themselves, and they have that critical thinking, naturally. It comes naturally to them. The rest can be really taught, and it's not everything is technical. Okay, there is a lot of work that has to be done that is not technical indeed, and these people can be taught the bits and pieces they don't know. But if a person is not motivated, and if they cannot communicate in a good manner, efficient manner, then they cannot just do their job properly. They cannot produce intelligence. So I would say motivation, communication, soft skills are quite important. I can take somebody who's, let's say, had a background in science or something else, but they're capable of producing what I need. We'll teach them the cyber part as needs be. Okay. I noticed there is a question in the chat. It was about AI.
Yes. So, Mr. Valery Dabrikov asks, do you think that AI, as it is improving rapidly, would have an impact, negative or positive, on threat intelligence?
Yes. Okay. Now, AI is a great thing. AI is the future of technology, period, at the moment. And yes, it can be quite helpful because, to be honest, one of the biggest useful pieces of collection is using the search engines and their good capabilities, also AI. Just it has to be really be taken with a grain of salt because AI is extremely vulnerable at the moment. There is about 70-80% of success rate on attacks against AI, prompt breakouts and so on. And that means it can be compromised, and then its way of producing information, its answers can be compromised. And if something is not very trustable as a resource, then you have to be quite careful with it. But AI is definitely in the future, and it will improve, and its security will improve. And I think it will have quite a positive effect on threat intelligence. For sure, offensive operators are using AI heavily at the moment for different purposes, from phishing email creations that are extremely convincing to generating effective scripts, pieces of malware, parts of the malware, and so on. So yeah, it will have a big effect on cyber threat intelligence, mostly in a positive manner, I hope.
Okay, that's and on that positive note, I think we can conclude this very interesting webinar. So again, this concludes the final Science for Sailing webinars for 2026. Our sincere thanks to you, Dimitar, for this insightful, engaging presentation. For our audience, a brand new webinar series is already in the works, so be sure to follow our social media channels for updates on the next Science for Sailing episodes. I'd like to thank you for joining us over the past 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and we hope you enjoyed the webinars as much as we did. So on behalf of the Antwerp Maritime Academy, we wish you and your loved ones a wonderful festive season and all the very best for 2026. Until the next time, goodbye and thank you.